Unrest continues to spread across Britain after protests erupted Saturday in London when police shot to death a young black man who was a suspected gang member, they said. Mobs firebombed police stations and set shops on fire in London, Manchester, Salford, Liverpool, Nottingham and Birmingham. After waiting for several days, Prime Minister David Cameron has cut short his Italian vacation and recalled Parliament to respond to the situation. Scotland Yard has ordered its officers to deploy every available force, including possible use of plastic bullets, to stop the riots. London yesterday was flooded with 16,000 police officers, the biggest police presence in the capital in history. Meanwhile, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, the IPCC, found that Mark Duggan, the 29-year-old black man whose death triggered the riots, did not fire on the police before he was shot.
One of the main developments that I can share is the tests we commissioned from the Forensic Science Service have so far confirmed that the bullet lodged in the MPS radio is a jacketed round. This is a police-issued bullet, and whilst it is still subject to DNA analysis, it is consistent with having been fired from an MPS Heckler & Koch MP5.
A representative for Mark Duggan's family said they were very sorry his death had led to the riots. Helen Shaw of the human rights group Inquest said his family is distressed at the unrest.
The family want everyone to know that the disorder going on has nothing to do with finding out what has happened to Mark. They also want everyone to know that they are deeply distressed by the disorder affecting so many communities across the country.
Links between Duggan's death and the unrest were rejected by British Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, who characterized the disorder as, quote, needless opportunistic theft and violence, nothing more, nothing less. Well, as protests enter their fourth day, with more than 760 people arrested in London, at least 50 people have been arrested over trouble in Manchester and Salford, where crowds of youths have set fire to buildings and cars, while almost 100 have been arrested over disorder which broke out across the West Midlands. We go to London, where we're joined by Darcus Howe, a broadcaster and columnist who lives in Brixton, South London. His TV work includes White Tribe, in which he put Anglo-Saxon Britain under the spotlight. Howe organized the 20,000-strong Black People's March in 1981, claiming official neglect and inefficient policing of the investigation of the New Cross fire, in which 13 black teenagers died. We're also joined in London by Richard Seymour, one of Britain's most popular bloggers. He blogs at Lenin's Tomb. He's the author of The Liberal Defense of Murder and the Meaning of David Cameron. We're going to go first to Darcus Howe. Talk about what is happening in your country right now. What is happening in Britain?
There is a mass insurrection. And I'm not talking about rioting. I'm talking about an insurrection that comes from the depths of society, from the consciousness collectively of the young blacks and whites, but overwhelmingly black, as a result of the consistent stopping and searching young blacks without cause. They changed the law. Before, you had to provide evidence that you were looking at this character doing this and bouncing ladies and pushing his hand in handbag before they stop and search you. They moved that clean out and replaced it with anti-terror legislation, that you could stop and search anybody, anytime, anywhere. And my grandson is 14 years old, and I asked him, I said, Nathan, how many times have you been stopped and searched? He said, Papa, I can't count. It's so many. And that anger has been simmering beneath the surface. Because when you have hundreds of thousands of young people acting simultaneously, the issue has to be simultaneously experienced. And so when Mark Duggan was executed, they all had empathy with it and issues in their minds about what life is and what it is not. The second practical thing is they're on holidays. The school year is over. And anybody who's been cooped up in a classroom in your teens for a term, you want out. And you feel freedom of, a spirit of freedom. You breathe widely. And you say, school over, monkey turnover. So that is a moment. I don't think it would have happened in January or the middle of October or anything. It's summer, it's warm. In fact, some of those nights were quite hot. And Mark Duggan lost his life. The Operation Trident, we have known Operation Trident for a long time. They came to investigate murders. And they did absolutely brilliantly. And I have been all open in saying it's a fine squad. Now, everything is changing in the Metropolitan Police. It is perhaps one of the most disgraced organizations in the United Kingdom at the moment. And it's headless. No commissioner, no deputy commissioner. So all these guys who are head of these operations, special ops, Razorback, Operation Razorback, Operation Trident, they're all over the place, jostling to draw the attention of the authorities to get that big job and the deputy. And so they go to Tottenham, where the first explosion took place, without telling the commander of that area. They were carrying that Glock Heckler pistol. That is a murderous weapon. It is the most murderous weapon you could ever put in your hands. In bright, broad daylight, among ordinary people, and they blew his chest away. They said that he had a pistol. Now they're saying the extra pistol wasn't his. We don't know. So two things. When they demonstrated, the family, to the police station, the commander, he could not come out and say anything because he was fussing all around trying to get in contact with his men on the ground. Nobody knew. And they did that and went their way. And so the degeneration of the Metropolitan Police, the competition for the job of Metropolitan Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner, that competition is on. And each one, they want to go, each commander would like to go to the extreme and put up his hand and beat his chest and say, I qualify. And that is the spirit at Scotland Yard.
Richard Seymour, I'd like to bring Richard Seymour into the discussion, Darcus. I'd like to bring Richard Seymour in and go back to the beginning, Mark Duggan, the killing of Mark Duggan, the 29-year-old black man, just to clearly understand, and you have written about this, what the police initially said, and then what has come out over time, further angering people. Richard Seymour.
Right. First of all, the circumstances of the killing are that they allowed people to believe that Mark Duggan had a weapon and that he shot that weapon at police officers, and that therefore you would conclude they fired back in self-defense. That's absolutely untrue. The IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, has confirmed that the bullet that was fired and lodged in a police radio was a police bullet. So it would be an interesting question who fired that bullet and why, which among the officers did so, but it certainly wasn't Mark Duggan. So they lied, but in addition to that, they didn't inform the family. They let the family find out from the media. And they didn't send round family liaison officer to speak to the family. None of the usual procedures in this highly unusual circumstance was followed. So generally speaking, there was a backlash, a reaction against the police as a result of this. I just want to say also in connection with this, Darcus mentioned the competition for the top jobs in the Metropolitan Police. It's important to note the backdrop here. This is the deep crisis that has shaken the Metropolitan Police in the context of the Hackgate scandal in relation to the relationships between top Metropolitan Police officials and the News of the World, News International empire. That has created a deep crisis within the police. It's an ideological crisis as much as anything else. So this is, I expect, one of the reasons for the disarray that they're in at the moment, and it will be why they are reaching for new weapons. Just today, David Cameron has allowed the police to use water cannon against rioters for the first time in this country.
Just to explain, that's the Murdoch scandal that you're talking about that took out the top leadership of Scotland Yard. But the protest at the police station the night of Mark Duggan's killing by the police.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was, until a certain amount of provocation by the police, largely peaceful. I mean, it was a protest led by local community activists wanting answers, wanting dialogue with the police, and not getting it, and being fobbed off. And the real flashpoint came, according to eyewitnesses, when a 16-year-old girl who was shouting at the police, lines of riot police demanding answers from them, was assaulted. She was beaten by several of them with batons and riot shields. Some of you may have seen the footage. It definitely shows that she's on the ground. She's getting a few hefty kicks as well. Several independent eyewitnesses have verified this. So I would say that the police have done more than enough to provoke this situation. Which obviously raises the question of why anybody thinks that the police, having provoked it, have any solutions to resolving it.
We're going to break and then come back to our discussion. Richard Seymour blogs at Lenin's tomb. Darcus Howe is a broadcaster, a columnist who lives in Brixton. His TV work includes a number of pieces over the decades, and he's particularly known for his criticism of police brutality issues in the communities in which he lives and covers. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.